Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nate Eaton outside the Ada County Courthouse on a lunch break from the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. Some big news out of the testimony this morning. The medical examiner has been on the stand most of the morning talking about JJ and Tylee, their autopsies that were done, what was found as they did these autopsies. And he determined and announced that JJ died from asphyxiation from a plastic bag and duct tape over his mouth. We knew that JJ was wrapped in plastic and buried in Chad Daybell's backyard. We did not know specifically how he died, whether he was drugged or shot or whatever other manners there will be. But the medical examiner just said moments ago that JJ Vallow died as a plastic bag was asphyxiation from a plastic bag and duct tape over his mouth. The toxology report showed some normal levels of substances that would be found in a normal body. It sounds like there was one substance, I believe it's called GHP, that was found in his system, but the body could naturally produce it. But basically, he said, that could be something, but it likely is not. Now, Tylee, before lunch, 10 minutes ago, the medical examiner announced that she died from homicide, but no exact way. She died of a homicide, but they don't know the exact how she died due to the homicide. So it's been a really heavy day here in the courtroom. Autopsy photos were shown. When I say autopsy photos, I mean something like 30 or so autopsy photos. They were not shown to the public. Rob Wood, the prosecutor, wanted to show the pictures. The defense objected, said that it was too prejudicial. Boyce overruled them, and then the defense asked if they could be shown in black and white. The defense, Boyce then met with all of the attorneys, and the decision was made to show the pictures to the jurors on monitors that are in front of them. The judge also has a monitor. The defense has a monitor that Lori can see, and the prosecution has a monitor. So they decided that they would show those images on the monitors, but not to the public. So all the monitors were turned around so we could not see. We still heard descriptions of the autopsy photos, and they were quite graphic and detailed, down to the duct tape that was over his mouth and ankles and things like that, but we did not see the images. One juror in particular was incredibly affected by this. I could tell. She was looking up. She was rubbing her finger on her lips. She was looking down. She was looking to the side, and she started to dab tears from her eyes. A young woman, probably in her 30s, maybe lower 40s, was clearly affected by these images. And then Lori also appeared to be affected by this. She was dabbing her eyes. She appeared to be crying. She did not look at the monitor. I did see her look at the monitor once. She glanced over and then turned back. She put her back to the monitor, and she took notes in a notepad, which is routinely what she does. She often is taking notes. So those are the major headlines from this morning's testimony. JJ Vallow died from asphyxiation due to a plastic bag and duct tape over his head and mouth. Tylee Ryan died due to homicide.
Our very own Gigi McKelvey, who's been there since day one, joins us now from outside the Ada County Courthouse. Gigi, good afternoon. I understand there's a latest from the courtroom. There's a lot from the courtroom, including the cause of death of JJ Vallow. Tell us all about what happened this morning.
Well, we finally learned his cause of death was asphyxiation due to the bag being over his head that was duct taped around his neck. So essentially suffocation or, just absence of breathing. And just disturbing details all morning. They were saying that he had scratches on his neck that were ante-mortem, which means before death. So, your mind kind of goes to, was he trying to get this off? Just very heartbreaking testimony that just brings it all home as to why we're here.
And this little boy was found with his pajamas on, indicating to us that maybe he was taken while he was in bed trying to sleep and vulnerable.
Well, the last photo of JJ, the morning he was last seen alive, he's in the same pajamas on the couch that he was found in. We know the last time he was seen was by David Warwick and Melanie Gibb, who were friends of Lori's and kind of in this group. He was asleep with his head on Alex's shoulder, and they took him upstairs to bed, and that was the last time he was seen. So he was killed at some point from that moment where he was last seen, and that next morning when Alex was on Chad's property to bury him.
Was there any indication that the children were given any type of drugs or alcohol from I assume it was the medical examiner who was on the stand this morning?
For JJ, they did call out one thing, and I don't remember the medical name for it, but it's the street name could be liquid ecstasy. However, they couldn't determine whether that was just part of the decomposition process, because that is present in our bodies. And so they weren't able to say with certainty whether he was given that or if that was just part of the decomposition process. As far as Tylee, she had ibuprofen in her system, carbon monoxide, not lethal amounts or anything like that. So it looked like their toxicology was pretty clean. Just that question of whether or not that one substance in JJ's body was naturally occurring or given.
And JJ also had bruising on his arm, leading to the jury maybe questioning whether or not he was fighting his assailant.
Yeah, and what the medical examiner made clear is when there's a question of whether or not this is a bruise, he will make an incision into the skin to see if there's any hemorrhage just underneath that first layer of skin, and there was. So this was bruising that occurred before JJ was murdered, and the indication, obviously would be perhaps he was fighting for his life between the bruises on the arms and the scratches on the neck.
Now, I understand there may have been something that could trigger the jury in terms of PTSD, in terms of the pictures that they watched today. What type of photos did they see? And more importantly, what was Lori Vallow Daybell's reaction to what was happening in that courtroom?
Well, the jury, what they did was they did not show us that were sitting in there on the big screen these close-up autopsy pictures. Lori's attorney said that it had more prejudicial risk than value. So what they did was made it private just for the jurors, but it was up close and we heard the descriptions. It was just different parts of the autopsy and his body being shown to the jurors with things pointed out. Lori, for the most part, sat with her back away from the monitor there at the defense table. She was crying. She was red-faced, wiping tears, and she didn't look, as far as I could tell, when they were showing Tylee's remains, but a couple of times we did see her glance over at that monitor when they were going through JJ's autopsy, but she just kind of had her head resting on her hand, her elbow on the table, if you could kind of imagine that, with a tissue in her hand, and would occasionally wipe her eyes.
And we all know, Gigi, that juries look at the defendant all the time. Did you see any reaction of any members of the jury looking over at Lori Vallow Daybell when this testimony was occurring about how her children died?
Several did look her way, I guess, to gauge any kind of reaction. There were jurors that were wiping tears from their eyes with tissues. But yeah, they did check her out a little bit to see if she was reacting, and she was reacting today. It did seem like she was crying.
And when the jurors were using tissues, exactly, when was it? That's the first question. And did Lori Vallow Daybell have any different reaction from viewing the pictures of JJ versus Tylee?
The one time that I did see a juror specifically grab a tissue was after they were finished discussing those scratches on JJ's neck. Just what you think could have happened there is just devastating to think about. And as far, well, I'm sorry, what was that question about Lori?
The second thing, was there any type of visible different reaction from Lori Vallow Daybell when the medical examiner was discussing and showing the pictures from JJ versus from Tylee?
There really wasn't much that I could see. I mean, like I said, she did glance over at that monitor a couple of times when they were showing JJ's photos, but not Tylee's. But other than that, she just stayed kind of in that one position with her elbow on the table and her head resting on a closed fist with a tissue in her hand, and just sat there very still. And, obviously she had to hear everything that was being described, and we weren't able to see, and obviously she wasn't looking, but just the description alone was it painted a picture that was not pretty.